Hi guys, welcome back to DocuMinded. I am your host, Genevieve. And we're talking about the second episode of the Karen Reed A Body in the Snow documentary. I decided to split this documentary portion up into its 5 sections. I didn't want to have to do a giant episode for all 5 episodes. I felt like that would cause us to end up needing to glaze over parts. So this episode really focuses on one thing. A question of, did I hit him? Now, the reason that this episode focuses on this is because a lot of people, including people that weren't even on the scene at the time of the incident, will get on the stand and say that they heard Karen Reed ask, did I hit him? Or they'll say that they heard her say, I hit him. In this episode, you see a lot of people get up on the stand. A lot of people that are very untrustworthy, because as you find out throughout the episode, many of the people that are saying they heard her say that she hit him or they heard her ask if she hit him, a lot of those people were actually not on the scene at the time. They are speaking on secondhand accounts from those that either were there or from what they've heard. I mean, this is a very small town. So while it might seem like it's not, because it's like, kind of in the Boston area, which Boston's very huge, but this is a very small, tight-knit community in the Boston area. So word definitely travels fast. You also find out a lot about the background goings on of what happened after his body was found. There are a lot of questions. I will admit, there are a lot of things that don't necessarily add up, but that's life. So I don't necessarily feel like some of those things should prove guilt or innocence. One of those being when they went looking for John O'Keefe. It was Karen and 2 other people in the car, and only Karen saw his body laying in the snow. Now, you might hear that and say, oh, well, that's because she knew where his body was. And I have an iffy relationship with saying that, just because of the fact that depending on where you're sitting in a car, you see things differently. I mean, cars have blind spots, and you're told to check your blind spots for a reason, because you might not always see everything that you're supposed to or that you need to. So to automatically say, oh, nobody else in the car saw him, she must have just known exactly where he was, and that's how she was able to find him. I feel like that's a little... That's conclusion jumping, in my opinion. Because there's no way to really know for sure. And a lot of people in this case will try and say, oh, I know for a fact that she did it because of XYZ. And none of it is based on definitive evidence, which I think is why a lot of people on the jury struggled, on the first jury at least, struggled to come up with a conclusion, and it led to a mistrial. I mean, I'm not giving anything away there unless you're brand new to this case and you don't know anything. But yes, its first case ended in a mistrial, and it was recently retried, and I'll talk about that with the last episode a little bit more. But there's just so much to unpack, so many things that don't make sense, so many pieces of a moving puzzle that it feels weird to go out on a limb and say 100% she did this when there's no way to know. I'm trying my best to keep my personal opinion out of it, but at the end of the day, the people that went on the stand against her with all of this superficial evidence as to why she had to have done it, but before this case happened would have called her a friend of theirs, they're terrible people. They minimize their involvement in everything. They maximize her issues and her anger, which this was a long-term relationship between two adults. I mean, even a long-term relationship between teenagers has its issues and has its arguments. I mean, that's just a fact. Every relationship has its issues. So to say, oh, well, the two of them had issues, that's why she did it. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of conclusion jumping that's happening within this story that shouldn't be happening. There's just a lot to unpack here, I feel like. You don't really know whose side you're supposed to take. The documentarians in this case do something very, very well throughout this series. This case is definitely one of those cases that when you hear about it, it sticks with you. And the reason it sticks with you is because there's no definitive way to find out if she did this, if somebody else did this, and there never will be. So this innocent man was killed, whether it was by Karen, whether it was by somebody else, whether it was by his own self-made accident, because that's a possibility that they don't really touch on too much, but is definitely something that could have happened. But these documentarians don't try and push you in any singular direction. They show you all sides with zero bias, and they do it very well. I've seen some other interviews and some other mini documentaries on this same case that you can tell where the creator lies in terms of how they feel about the situation. This documentary does a really interesting thing of maybe for like 10 minutes they'll show you something and they'll make you think like, oh wow, maybe she didn't do it. Maybe she really is being framed. Maybe this, maybe that. And then the next 10 minutes after that is all showing you, well, maybe she actually did do it. Maybe this is what happened. And they play all avenues very, very well. One of the avenues that they discuss is, and I, even for a serious podcast like this, I struggle to say this guy's name without chuckling a little to myself. In this second episode, they talk about a guy named Turtle Boy, who is this commentarian, from what I understand. He is, I'm not sure if he is asked to discuss the case or if he starts discussing the case. But his coverage of the case, sorry, I'm like reading my notes as I'm doing this. His coverage of the case does a lot of damage control that is not seen in Karen's defense. And that's nothing against Karen's defense. when you're an attorney, your job is not to do social damage control or to necessarily try and get the greater public to feel guilty for your victim or for your client. It is your job as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, my bad. Your job as a defense attorney is genuinely just to make sure that your client does not go to jail. That is your number one goal. That is your number one focus. So there is no fault in them for the fact that they really did not do much damage control, because all the damage control that is in their job description was done in the courtroom. And so then you have this guy, Turtle Boy, who starts talking about it, starts piquing the interest of a lot of people that are emotionally or personally involved in the case. And that person talking about this is the one that gives it the momentum to gain national attention. And that is when you see two sides of this case really get carved out in their respective places. You see the John O'Keefe side, which is, of course, Karen did it. The police are saying that she did it. The police wouldn't lie. She did it. She hated him. All this stuff. And so they're supporting her going to jail, her being charged with this crime and paying the price for it. Then you see the other side that is really carved out by this Turtle Boy guy and other supporters. That is, she didn't do this. Whether or not they believe the story that gets painted by the defense, which is that she was framed, which I have an iffy relationship with agreeing with that. I am very much a 50-50 kind of in the middle person with the whole framing situation. But then you have all these people showing up. You either have people in, I believe it was green for John O'Keefe, or you have people in pink showing that they support Karen Read. What you also have is more information coming out, because as, jury selection is finished and the case starts going to trial, you find out a lot more. One of the big things that, even as a second-time watcher of this case and of this documentary, was very shocking to me is the How Long to Die in the Cold Google search made by Jennifer McCabe. Now, Jennifer McCabe was one of the people that was at the bars with all of them. I believe she was the one that invited Karen and John over to her brother's house to continue the celebration. She was one of the first people that Karen called when she couldn't find John O'Keefe and could not get a hold of him, and Karen asked Jen to go looking for him with her. So Jennifer McCabe is a moving piece in this puzzle that changes shape a lot. You see her go from this friend of the couple to this friend of Karen Read's, this midnight supporter, so to speak, of, I think Karen called Jen at I think they said 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that. You're so close to this person that you pick up the phone, you go out in the dark of the early morning in the middle of a snowstorm to look for this person's boyfriend, and someone that was a friend of yours as well. And yet, the first thing you do when you get on the stand is throw her under the mud, or under the bus. You throw her in the dirt, as if you almost didn't really care about her to begin with. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying, like, get on the stand and lie for your friends. Like, I'm definitely not saying that. Like, if your friend does something wrong, they need to be held accountable, and, you gotta do what's right. But at the same time, we kind of have this situation with Jen where it seems like she'll do anything to throw Karen Reed under the bus and do anything to make Karen Reed look like a bad person. And that's a difficult thing to see, because for a while she seems like this really great person, this really great friend. I believe both her husband and her brother were on the police force. Like, they all seem like incredibly stand-up people in the community, until they don't, until you hear a lot of things. And before Jennifer McCabe was called in to help look for John O'Keefe, she Googled something, and that is how long to die in the cold. And this is where you also see another shift. She very intensely denies ever Googling this, ever searching this up, it ever crossing her phone. The problem with that, and you want to believe her because she's very adamant. She is. She's very adamant. She's very strong in her stance of, I didn't do this. The issue with that is technology doesn't lie. It can't. So when you go in somebody's phone and you're looking around at their data and you see that they Googled how long to die in the cold, there's no way that they didn't Google it. They are also able to see how at some point within that time that she Googled it, she also deleted the page off of her phone. So she didn't keep it up. She doesn't, say that she did it. She denies. The issue is you can't deny something like that. And the prosecution really failed here in solidifying the idea that she didn't search this up. The prosecution calls somebody in with very minor, legitimate technological background to refute the claims that somebody with extensive technology background said is 100% factual and 100% had to have happened. The prosecution calls in somebody who is just does not hold the same reliability as the person that the defense called. And that raises a lot of questions. That raises a lot of flags. You also see how the first prosecutor fumbles the bag in a lot of ways. Something that's not talked about too much in the public is how cases are handled. Kind of the bare bones structure. And the bare bones structure is, there's, the defense and the prosecutor, they both get up and they say their piece, and then they start doing, then they start calling people to stand and asking the questions. the issue starts with the prosecutor. Instead of taking what the public, and now I'm not saying that what the public says should always be brought into consideration, but, and so maybe I won't use the word public opinion here. What I'll use is detectives. Instead of pulling in what could have possibly happened that didn't involve Karen Reed, to kind of try and, refute those claims and they say that maybe this could have happened, but there's actually no way because A, B, C. All this guy does is just stand up there for, I think they said like an hour or an hour and a half, something crazy, and just lists like all of the people, all of the places, the time markers, like everything that the jury will see over the course of the entire trial is basically being shoved down their throats in the first hour and a half of them sitting down, which is not the right way to handle a situation like this. And they even talk about the fact that this prosecutor was very known for being kind of a no-nonsense prosecutor. He wasn't much for the, attention-grabbing statements that are often used in trials or anything like that. He was a very, straight to the point, get to the point kind of person. And I think at the end of the day, that kind of damaged his case in a lot of ways. And so you end up with one side saying, well, this is exactly what happened because here's the timestamps and here's all these other reasons and here's all this, and you have to listen to it for an hour and a half and you just have to sit there. You get that. Then you also get the defense, which is saying, this is what they're going to say. This is what the prosecution's going to say is happening. This is how we know it's not true. And this is what we think happened. And this is how we know that that's what happened. And that gives people a lot more to think over in the defense's favor. And so you see a lot of struggle in this episode, whether it be this sense of betrayal that you kind of feel because of the way that Jennifer McCabe treated Karen Reed. You also hear how after seeing her dead boyfriend's body in the snow, Karen Reed is taken to the hospital and placed under a psych hold because they thought that she would unalive herself. And that triggers an emotional response when you hear about something like that. I watched another documentary recently. I'm not going to say which one because it may or may not come up in an episode in next season. But you see how that person reacts when they find out that the person that they very clearly attacked, like there was no way that it was anybody else. People saw this person shoot another person. You can't really get around that. You see her reaction when she finds out that this person is dead, and then you see Karen Reed's reaction. And I'm not saying that people aren't great actors or actresses, but there's a difference. You feel a difference. And that's something that I feel like really starts to, in this episode, push people in Karen Reed's favor. But that's where I'm going to stop for today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're into books, go ahead and check out Pretty Little Book Nerds. We have some incredible titles coming up that we're going to be discussing soon. When this gets released, this upcoming Saturday, we will be talking about The 3 Lives of Kate Kay by Kate Fagan. Next Saturday, we'll be talking about The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, which is a crowd favorite. Our one episode for December before we go on break for the holidays is Merry Christmas, You Filthy Animal by Megan Quinn. And I think when we record that episode, we'll be sharing some stuff about January and maybe even some stuff about February. If you're into music, go ahead and check out the music podcast that I do with my dad. It's called Listen to the Music. So far, we have covered I Advanced Mass by Andy Summers, as well as Wishbone by Conan Gray. Coming up this weekend as well on Sunday, I believe, we will be discussing Discipline by King Crimson. So if you're into some prog rock, feel free to come join us. And yeah, stick around here. This is the only episode for November for this podcast. November is kind of an odd month because we take some time off for a very American holiday of Thanksgiving. And yeah, then we'll be back in December, and then we take 2 weeks off, and then we'll be back in January. I love doing this. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys next month. Love you. Stay safe.